a young couple set out to establish a Chabad center in a new town. And as all shluchim, as all emissaries of the Rebbe, they proceeded to gather a minyan, get some people to attend classes and study and so on. And eventually they needed a building. So they were going to launch a building campaign. They got together a list of wealthy people and proceeded to visit them or call them for appointments to see if they can't raise the money for a down payment on a building. And they needed $43,000 down payment. They made an appointment with an individual who they had never met at his house. And they came to the appointment. And they walk into the house. And the first thing they notice is a picture of the rebbe over the mantelpiece on the fireplace. They were a little taken aback by that because they didn't think that the rebbe had become that well known in this particular town, where there was no Lubavitch center or Lubavitch activity. So the young chassid said to the man, he said, "What is this?" And the man said, "If you're a rabbi, you know who this is." He said, "I know who it is. What is it? How come you have a picture of the Rebbe?" So the man said, "Well, sit down, I'll tell you the story." He says, "I do a lot of business in New York, and I'm there quite often. And I was visiting with one of my clients. We were out eating in Manhattan. And this client takes out his wallet and he shows me pictures of his family and of his children. And I must have turned white because the man said, What's the matter? What's the problem?" So I told him that my wife and I have been married for many years, and we don't have children, and we've tried everything, and we're just really in a lot of pain about this, that we were not blessed with children. So this client said to me, "I may not be the one to speak about these things because I'm not religious or observant in any way, but if I were you, I would go into Brooklyn and see the Lubavitcher Rebbe and get a blessing from him. I hear it really works." Well, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. This was not for me. That's not my style. I'm not into this. I don't believe in this. And there was no way I was going to do that. And besides, I had a plane to catch. I had to be at the airport. So I thanked him for his suggestion, but I set off to the airport to catch my flight. I get to the airport and I find out that my flight has been delayed for 2 hours. So now I'm sitting in the airport and I'm thinking to myself, I got nothing to do here. I can either sit in the airport and waste 2 hours, or maybe I should run into Brooklyn and get this blessing from the rabbi. So I hopped into a taxi, go down to Brooklyn, come to 770, and not knowing how this works or what the rules of the game is, I walk inside and I say I'd like to see the rabbi, the rebbe. And the secretary there said, "Do you have an appointment?" I never heard of making an appointment with a rebbe. And I said, "No, I don't have an appointment. I'm in a hurry and I got to see the rebbe. It's very important." And they said, "Well, we'll make you an appointment. You come back in a month." I said, "Not in a month. I have to catch a plane in an hour." Anyway, they looked at me rather strangely and shrugged their shoulders and like, "There's no way." I was really put off by that. I was really upset. And I slammed the door. I walked out of the office, slammed the door. And this chassid looks at me and says, is everything okay? Something wrong? And I said, I drove out here from the airport, all the way from the airport, to get an appointment with the rebbe, and they won't let me see the rebbe. So he said, the chassid said to me, is it an emergency? And I said, I think so. So he whispers, the chassid whispers to me, and he says, let me tell you what you should do. The rebbe is going to come out of his room for mincha in about 10 minutes. He's going to come out of the door here on the left. He's going to cross the hallway into the shul where they're davening, off here on the right. Now, if I were you, I would simply stop the rebbe on his way and tell him what I need. But don't tell anybody that I told you to do this, or I'll get killed. So I did that. I waited for the rebbe to come out. And as the rebbe came out into the hallway, I simply pushed myself through the crowd and stood in the rebbe's way and was going to say something to him, but I got so choked up, I couldn't talk. I couldn't say anything. I was just totally... And the rebbe said, you want to ask me something? And I nodded. So the rebbe turned around, went back into his room. I followed him into his room, and then standing there inside, just by the door, the rebbe said, no. And I finally was able to tell the rebbe how desperately we wanted to have a child, and how miserable we were over the fact that we didn't have any children, and so on. And the rebbe said to me, I see you're a businessman. I'm a businessman too. We have no time to waste. So, promise me that you will put on tefillin every day, and I promise you that you will have children. And that just made me even crazier, because that was the last thing I expected the rebbe to say. I thought some kind of prayer, some kind of ritual or something, but this was like just... And again, I was totally speechless. And the rebbe waited and finally said, no, you promise? And I said, yes. And the rebbe said, I promise also. And then the rebbe just went ahead with the mincha. And that's why I have a picture of the rebbe in my house. So the chassid, of course, needed to know the rest of the story. And he said, so what about the blessing? So the man introduced him to his 3 children who were having dinner in the kitchen. Then the man says to him, so what do you need from me? So the chassid says, we're trying to buy a building and we need a down payment, $43,000, and we're asking 10 people to contribute towards the $43,000. So the man said, I'll give you the $43,000. And you don't have to go to anybody else. And the chassid was pleasantly surprised, and he said, that's great, you're very generous. And the man said, well, you happen to catch me at the right time. Tonight is my 43rd birthday. And that's how that particular Chabad house got off the ground. That Chabad center got off the ground. But what I would like to consider for a moment is the Rebbe's answer. I see you're a businessman. I'm also a businessman, and we have no time to waste. Now, in what way is the Rebbe a businessman? So the Rebbe once spoke at a Fabrengen, the difference between the world of business and the world of yeshiva. There are people who live their lives in the world of the yeshiva. Their life, their days are filled with study, with prayer. It's a world, a life of yeshiva. The world of Torah. And that's their entire life, which is wonderful and holy and special and so on. Then there's the life of business. the life of making a living. One of the differences between these two lives, these two lifestyles, is that in the world of Torah, in the world of the yeshiva, there is never a rush. There's never a hurry. You study as much as you can today, and whatever you don't study today, you'll study tomorrow. In the business world, there are always deadlines. There's an opportunity, there's a possibility, make an investment, make a purchase, and if you don't do it now, tomorrow is too late. Tomorrow, it's over. If you don't buy at the right time, you don't sell at the right time, then you lose it. So the difference between the two worlds is that in the world of business, you can't afford to wait to tomorrow. You've got to take advantage of what's available today. In the world of yeshiva, there's always tomorrow. There's never a time pressure. When the Rebbe said, I'm a businessman too, promise me you'll put on tefillin, I promise you you'll have children. What the Rebbe was saying is that in the world of Yiddishkeit, in the world of Torah, in the world of mitzvahs, we really should all experience it as a business, in the sense that with mitzvahs, there is a time consideration. Today's mitzvah, of course, can be performed tomorrow as well, but you've lost whatever was unique and special about today. So putting on tefillin today is in some way unique because today is unique. And if you don't put on the tefillin today, sure, you'll put them on tomorrow, but then it's a different mitzvah. It's tomorrow's mitzvah, not today's mitzvah. And in the Rebbe's world, in the Rebbe's yeshiva, a world of mitzvahs, a world of Torah, a world of Yiddishkeit, there was this element of time consideration. It's got to be now. You can't lose an opportunity. You can't delay a mitzvah. So when the Rebbe meets with a Jew, there is no tomorrow, there's today, like a businessman. And therefore, we have no time to waste, the Rebbe said. So let's make this deal. You promise to put on the tefillin, and I promise you you'll have children. There's another aspect to business, and that is that in business you never buy and sell at the same price, because as the Gemara says, a person who buys and sells at the same price, can this be called a businessman? Can this be called a business? That's just being busy, but it's not a business. Business means that you invest a certain amount, but you harvest, you profit more than what you invested. In other words, there's got to be the progress, there's got to be the improvement, there's got to be the growth. You have to make a profit. Now, in Torah and mitzvahs, of course, we do the mitzvah because God asks us to do the mitzvah, because God wants us to do the mitzvah, because God needs us to do the mitzvah. We are serving Him. And therefore there is no thought of reward. There's no thought of profit. But on the other hand, every mitzvah does bring a profit, a great profit. The amount of godliness that we absorb, the amount of holiness that we absorb, the amount of life that the mitzvah gives us is a great profit that we gain in the doing of the mitzvah. So although we don't do it for the sake of a reward, but the fact is that there is an infinite reward, there is a great reward that results from the doing of a mitzvah. And in that sense, doing mitzvahs, living the life of Yiddishkeit, serving God, can be seen as a business in this sense that there is a profit, there is a benefit, there is a resulting improvement that comes from the doing of the mitzvah. And that might help explain the connection, the relationship. You promise to put on tefillin, I promise you you'll have children. What's the connection? Now, there are mitzvahs that are more directly related or associated with having children. Now, the Rebbe could have said, promise me that you'll observe the laws of mikveh, and I promise you you'll have children. But the Rebbe said tefillin. So we see that all mitzvahs that a person does is life-giving and can facilitate, can help give life, give birth, add life. So when the Rebbe said, you promise me you'll put on tefillin, I promise you you'll have children, there were two things going on here. First of all, there was the Rebbe's input. The fact that the Rebbe loves this Jew with all his heart, with all his soul, and with all his might. And that energy, that concern, that care, that's the blessing. When you come to a Rebbe and you ask for his blessing, you're not asking for incantations. You're not asking for him to do some mumbo-jumbo. You're coming to him because you want to add to your life, into your life, the concern, the love, the devotion, the care that the Rebbe offers because he loves every Jew. And so adding that love, adding that care is an additional energy source, an additional life source that can make things happen that were not happening because of not enough energy, not enough life. So the blessing that the Rebbe gives is his love, his concern, and his care. So when the Rebbe says, I promise you, that's an infusion of life coming from the Rebbe's soul to the soul of the recipient of the blessing. What form does this energy take? How do we capture this energy? How do we contain that energy into our own lives? Through the performance of a mitzvah. So the Rebbe says, if you will put on tefillin, I promise you will have children. Because the tefillin will serve as the vessel, the container, into which the Rebbe's energy and the Rebbe's love and the Rebbe's concern and the Rebbe's devotion to this Jew can be held and can be absorbed, taken home into the person's private life. Also, the birth of a child depends on many things, but it begins in the brain. I'm not sure exactly what the scientific studies would say on the subject, but there's no question that fertility, procreation, begins in the brain. And so putting on tefillin, which is a mitzvah that involves the mind and the heart, and that creates a bond between mind, heart, and action, which is why you put the tefillin on your head, and you put a tefillin facing the heart, and then the straps are wound around the arm, the action, so that the mind, the heart, and the deeds and the behavior are all in harmony with each other. And all of them together in that harmony are devoted to the mitzvah, are wrapped up in the mitzvah, in the serving of God, so that the mind, the heart, and the deeds are all permeated with the holiness and with the godliness of the mitzvah, so that the energy of the mind affects the behavior, and the behavior, the actual doing of a good deed, strengthens the mind. There's a mutual benefit there between theory and action. So the theory animates the action, and then the action gives substance and strength to the theory. The behavior of a person strengthens and solidifies his mind his attitude, his perception of the world, and so on. And the perception, of course, is what guides and stimulates behavior. So by putting on the tefillin, you're actually creating a harmony, a channel, where the energy of the brain, which is essential in giving birth and in fertility, where the energy of the brain can be connected in harmony with the heart, and from the heart to the action, to the physical, so that the fertility process is actually enhanced in that way. So there are actually three things going on here. Number one, the Rebbe's energy, the Rebbe's blessing. And it's been said and it's been written that the look of a tzaddik, when a holy person, when a tzaddik looks at you, that gives you additional life. That can heal all sorts of unhealthy conditions. Because it's the energy, it's the concern, it's that look of devotion, or that look of interest, where the Rebbe cares. That is life-giving in and of itself. So there's that part, the blessing coming from the Rebbe himself. Then there's the combination of two Jews getting together to solve a problem. And the fact that a Jew seeks out another Jew, that too is life-giving. When a brother turns to a brother for help, that makes their entire existence more healthier, more real, because there is a shared energy, brother to brother. And of course the father, who has to provide the health, God, who has to give us the children and the blessings of good health and so on, is more willing, more available when his children turn to each other. So the fact that a Jew will turn to another Jew for help is also a source of blessing, because when Jews get along, God gets involved. And thirdly, the act of the mitzvah. This energy, this love, this giving, this blessing has to have a vessel that contains it in order for it to become a physical blessing. Otherwise, you walk away with a good feeling, but you still won't have any children. So to turn it into an actual physical birth, to be able to take the blessing home, you need to contain it in something. Now, what is a useful container for something so intangible, something so spiritual as a blessing? The proper container is the mitzvah. Now you can choose many mitzvahs. There are 613 mitzvahs. So the Rebbe sensed or knew which mitzvah would serve best as a container for this particular individual and for the blessing which he was asking for. And it was the mitzvah of tefillin. The introduction of godliness to the mind, heart, and deeds and actions. So as soon as this man promised that he would put on tefillin, the blessing began to have an effect. Because in our relationship with God, which is an intimate relationship, it's not only the deed that has an effect, but even the fact that we are relating. In other words, when a Jew is determined to do a mitzvah, when a Jew makes the resolution, is resolved to do the mitzvah, that already creates the beginnings of a bond, of an intimate bond between the person and God. The person is responding to God's will. If God wants me to put on tefillin, I will do so. That itself is already an intimacy between the person and God. Then when he actually does it, that intimacy takes on a practical, tangible, physical reality. And that's why the Rebbe has said very often, as soon as we make the resolution to do the mitzvah, God already gives us his blessings, trusting that we will do what we resolve to do. And that's why on Yom Kippur, for example, we resolve to do mitzvahs, we resolve to serve God, but we don't do it because Yom Kippur, we spend the entire day sitting in the synagogue, sitting in shul. So it's the resolution itself. It's the fact that we make the resolve. It's the fact that we intend to do the mitzvah that brings us the forgiveness on Yom Kippur before we even get around to actually doing the mitzvah. But it's the resolve to do the mitzvah, knowing that this is what God wants, and we are responding to his will. And when we do get around to doing the mitzvah, then that intimate connection takes on a real, tangible, physical reality. And that's what the Rebbe meant. I'm a businessman too. That in Judaism, you can have all the right intentions and all the right feelings and all the right kavanas, but it's not a business. It's not getting down to actual deed and actual accomplishment. To be a businessman in Judaism means that not only do you have the right feelings, but you also have the right deeds. You also do it, and do it urgently, because today counts. Tomorrow is another day, it's another mitzvah. We have to do it now. That's business. Don't miss an opportunity. Don't delay, because today will be lost, and tomorrow, well, that's a whole new deal. The business of Yiddishkeit. And on occasion of the thoughts about the Rebbe, this is part of the legacy that the Rebbe has left us, that for the Jew, Yiddishkeit is everything. It's the reason, it's the style, it's the deed, it's our business. It's our only business.